The officers called his rifle a joke, but by the fourth day, 11 enemy sharpshooters were dead because of it. At 9:17 a.m., on January 22, 1943, Lieutenant John George crouched in the shattered remains of a Japanese bunker west of Point Cruz. Through the lens of a scope his comrades had mocked for weeks, he fixed his eyes on a banyan tree 140 yards away. Just 27 years old and Illinois' youngest ever state shooting champion, he had yet to fire a single combat round. But over the past 3 days, Japanese marksmen had claimed 14 men from the 132nd Infantry. His CO dismissed George's custom rifle as a toy. Fellow officers joked it was his mail-order sweetheart when George first unpacked his Winchester Model 70 at Camp Forest, Tennessee, complete with a Lyman Alaskan scope and griffin, and how mount the armorer smirked. "Is this for deer or Germans?" George replied calmly, "For the Japanese." But the rifle didn't ship with his unit. While others cleaned standard-issue Garans aboard the troop transport, George's weapon sat in a warehouse back in Illinois. He sent a request through military mail. 6 weeks later, on a December morning in 1942, a sergeant tossed him a crate marked fragile. Inside was the rifle he'd saved 2 years' worth of National Guard wages to buy. It weighed 9 pounds, had the scope, and it tipped just over 10. Meanwhile, every other soldier lugged a 9.5-pound Garand with 0 magnification. George's bolt-action held 5 rounds. The Garand, 8, semi-auto. Captain Morris ordered him to ditch the sporting piece. George carried it anyway. 1 man, 1 rifle, 11 snipers. By late December, the 132nd relieved battle-worn Marines who'd held Henderson Field since August but never cleared Mount Austin or the coastal groves west of the Metnacar River. That mountain, dubbed Gaifu by the Japanese, bristled with 47 bunkers and 500 defenders. George's battalion attacked December 17th. After 16 brutal days, 30 for dead, 279 wounded, they finally seized the western slope on January 2nd. Yet George hadn't fired a shot in anger. The jungle near Point Cruz was different. No fixed lines, just enemy holdouts camouflaged in colossal trees. Some snipers wielded scoped Arisaka Type 98s. They knew every vine, every shadow, and they were hunting Americans. On January 19th, Corporal Davis fell while refilling canteens. January 20th, to more from L Company. January 21st, 3 dead, including 1 shot through the neck from a tree patrol that had passed twice. That night, the battalion commander summoned George. "These snipers are killing us faster than disease," he said. "Can that fancy rifle actually hit anything?" George laid out his credentials. Youngest Illinois state champion at 23. 6-inch groups at 600 yards with irons, 5 shots within 4 inches at 300 with his scope. "Give me till dawn," he said. George spent the night meticulously cleaning cosmoline residue from the Winchester. He checked the mount screws. He loaded 5 rounds of .3006 hunting ammo, same cartridge as the Garand, but hand-loaded for precision. At first light, he slipped into a captured bunker overlooking the groves. No spotter dot, no radio. Just rifle, canteen, and 60 rounds in stripper clips. The Lyman Alaskan offered only to .5x magnification, modest, but enough to catch subtle motion among branches. Birds chirped, bugs hummed, artillery rumbled distantly. George filtered it all, watching a massive banyan. At 9:17, a branch shifted, no wind. 90 feet up, 240 yards out. A shadow in a fork of limbs, a sniper facing east, watching the supply trail. George dialed to clicks right for wind, controlled his breath. Smooth 3.2-pound trigger pull adjusted months earlier at Camp Perry. He fired. The crack echoed through the canopy. The sniper jerked, then plummeted 90 feet to the jungle floor. Japanese snipers worked in pairs, 1 shooter, 1 observer. George knew the spotter was close. He scanned neighboring trees slowly to .5x, forced patience. At 9:43, he found him 60 yards north, 50 feet high, descending fast. George led the movement, fired. The second man tumbled backward, rifle clattering ahead of him. 2 shots, 2 kills. Commer's target practice, except now the targets shot back. By 11:21, a bullet slammed into a sandbag 6 inches from George's head. Dirt sprayed his face. He rolled left, pressed against the bunker wall. The shot came from the southwest new direction. He waited 3 minutes, then crept back, scanning southwest. The shooter would have relocated, but dense foliage limited options. At 11:38, George spotted him, third tree in a cluster, 73 feet up. Same tree, new perch. A fatal error. Crosshairs settled. Shot fired. Silent fall. By noon, 5 snipers dead. Word spread. Mockers now begged to watch. George refused. Spectators attracted fire. The enemy adapted. Movement ceased by afternoon. George returned to HQ at 1600. Captain Morris's tone had changed. "Be back at dawn," he said. Rain hammered Guadalcanal on January 23rd. Visibility dropped below 100 yards. George waited. At 8:15 a.m., the rain eased. By 8:45, he could see. At 9:12, he spotted sniper number 6 to 190 yards out. Higher range, smarter placement. George adjusted, fired. Hit. Then unexpected. At 9:57, mortar rounds bracketed his position. First landed 40 yards short. Second, 20 short. Third would be on target. George snatched his rifle and sprinted north, diving into a shell crater just as the bunker vanished in smoke and debris. He repositioned near a fallen log 120 yards north. Clear sightlines, solid cover. By to 23 p.m., kill 7. At 3:41, kill 8. A sniper silhouetted 90 feet up as sunlight shifted. At 5 p.m., Morris sent a runner. George reported 8 kills, 12 rounds fired. Morris ordered him back at dawn on the 24th. That night, George did the math. 11 snipers total. 8 gone. 3 left, all seasoned survivors who now knew his rifle, his face, his habits. He loaded fresh rounds and sat awake in his tent. Rain returned at 4:15 a.m. By 5:30, it was torrential. Dawn ops delayed. George used the cover to shift south 70 yards from prior spots to a marine-used rock nest offering overlapping fields of fire. At 7:43, the drizzle lightened. At 8:17, he saw Sniper 9, low in the palm, just 40 feet up. Odd. Snipers preferred height, but George, elevated on rocks, saw shoulders through fronds. He aimed, then froze. Too easy. After killing 8, the last wouldn't blunder like this. Bait. He scanned methodically. At 8:28, found the real threat. 91 feet up in a banyan 80 yards northwest. Perfect camouflage. Eyes locked on George's old position. George's dilemma. Shoot the decoy, reveal his location, and risk being outmaneuvered by the hidden marksman. He took the bait. Fired. Decoy dropped. Instantly swung to the real sniper who turned toward the muzzle flash. George fired again. Second kill. But his position was blown. He bolted east, dropping into a muddy ditch 40 yards away. At 8:34, machine gun fire shredded the rocks where he'd stood 6 seconds earlier. 17 seconds of lead. George counted to 60, then moved again, this time to a rain-filled shell crater 100 yards east. Water reached his chest. He rested the Winchester on the rim and resumed scanning. 10 dead. 1 left. The best. The smartest. The one who'd watched 10 comrades fall. George knew this final duel would test every lesson learned. At 9:47, he realized his error. The last sniper wasn't in the trees. He was on the ground, crawling parallel to the tree line, 60 yards south. At 9:52, the enemy halted 40 yards from George's last known spot. At 9:58, he resumed closing to 30, then 25 yards. He tracked George's escape route from the machine gun ambush. At 10:03, the sniper reached the rock nest and faced east toward where George should be. His back was exposed, but George hesitated. Too obvious. A second man must be watching. At 10:06, he spotted him, 70 yards northwest, behind a log, rifle trained on the ditch. 2 left, not 1. Bolt action meant 1 shot, then reload to slow for 2 targets. George chose stealth. He sank into the water, barrel skyward, eyes barely above the surface. At 10:13, the decoy stood, signaled his partner, and both began sweeping east. They passed George's crater, backs turned. He rose silently, fired at 42 yards. First man down. Bolt cycled. The second man turned, fired again. Both died. 11 snipers, 11 rounds. The Grove threat was neutralized. But then voices. Japanese voices. 6 men, maybe more, moving toward the bodies. George sank back into the water. They found his boot prints. At 10:31, a soldier appeared at the crater rim. Eyes locked. George fired from the water, then rose, dropped to more, charging the rim. 3 rounds left. Flanking fire from south and east. George bolted north, sprinting 90 seconds through underbrush before diving into a dry crater. Gunfire cracked around him but stopped. The enemy regrouped near their dead. At 10:47, George moved northeast low, deliberate. At 11:13, he reached the American lines. Captain Morris debriefed him, 11 snipers in for days. 12 rounds, 11 hits, plus 3 infantry kills. 2 rounds remaining. Mud in the action. Water in the barrel. Clean it and rest, Morris said. We're advancing east. The Japanese are evacuating. George spent hours disassembling and oiling the Winchester. At 2 p.m., Colonel Ferry summoned him. Can you train others? George agreed, but only if he kept his rifle. Ferry approved. 14 Marine surplus Springfields with unearthed scopes. 40 expert marksmen. Training began January 27th. Skill beats equipment every time. He drilled them on wind reading, trigger control, field expedients for stability. By January 30th, 32 of 40 could hit man-sized targets at 300 yards under jungle conditions. He formed 16 two-man teams, shooter and spotter, roles interchangeable. On February 1st, for teams deployed west of the Matnikau, George and Corporal Hayes oversaw a trail. At 7:20 a.m., Hayes spotted movement. George fired it. Over 6 hours, 7 more engagements, 6 kills, 1 miswind miscalculation. Total that day, 23 enemy dead, 0 US casualties. By February 9th, his sniper section had 70 for confirmed kills. Then on February 7th, George took a round through the left shoulder near the Tanamboga River. Hayes dragged him to safety. The bullet missed bone and arteries. Evacuated to a field hospital. George recovered as the Japanese completed their Guadalcanal withdrawal. His war wasn't over. Pacific Command needed jungle veterans for a classified Burma mission. George volunteered. By March, aboard a transport, his Winchester now fitted with a lighter Weaver 330 scope and synthetic stock rode in a waterproof case. In April, he joined Merrill's Marauders, a 3,000-man unit trained for long-range jungle penetration. Over 3 brutal months in 1944, they marched 700 miles through mountains and monsoons. George fired his Winchester just 3 times each at extreme range, each a kill. But close quarters ambushes dominated. The scoped bolt action saw little use. By May, they seized Mike Keener Airfield, but at terrible cost. Disease claimed more than bullets. The Marauders were combat ineffective. George returned stateside, promoted to captain, teaching marksmanship at Fort Benning. His rifle rested in a footlocker. 14 confirmed kills, maybe more. In 1947, he published Shots Fired in Anger, a technical masterpiece still revered by historians. He never sought fame. He studied politics at Princeton, worked in Africa, served in the State Department. Few knew of Point Cruz. John George died January 3, 2009, at age 90. His Winchester now resides at the National Firearms Museum, unassuming, yet legendary. The rifle that proved a civilian marksman, armed with skill and a mail-order scope, could outthink and outshoot an empire's elite. If this story stirred something in you, please hit that like button. It helps the channel Winds of Thought reach more history lovers. And drop a comment. Where are you watching from?